It's official. Max Verstappen wishes to retire it, a thing which has defined his very career. And I already know that some of you may say, come on, it's only just a number. But that's exactly what this is all about. If there's one thing I've learnt in this business, do not mess with people who like numbers in Formula 1. With Max Verstappen finally voicing what his number history has long suggested. The FIA cracking open Pandora's box over driver identifiers. And fans are reacting the way you would expect them to react if you dare touch or even look at something funny which has something to do with identity, merchandise, as well as, of course, nostalgia. We all remember the brouhaha that came about when Gabriel Bortoleto declared that he wished to have the number 5 on his car, and everyone saying, "How dare you take that from Sebastian?" Even though it was a majorly important number in his native Brazil, with the connotations of Nelson Piquet being a 3-time world champion, and he himself winning his F3 championship with that particular number. If you actually look through the many reasons why drivers have the numbers they do, they are very important to them. Same goes for Max. And ahead of the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend, Max became one of the first drivers asked about the FIA's recent comments following the final F1 Commission meeting of the year, where a proposal allowing drivers to change numbers mid-career was discussed and approved in principle. If you're not quite sure what he actually said, here is what Verstappen said for your consideration. Ahem. My favourite number is 3, but I still have to wait and see if that's actually possible and permitted. I'll see over the winter. In the end, it doesn't matter that much to me. The number 3 carries a lot of significance with many other fans, especially current Formula 1 fans. Yeah, it's Daniel Ricciardo's number, mate. Some may claim that Max's bond with that number is not deep, but it's stronger than you think. And it explains why 33 might actually go should he have to relinquish the number 1 at the end of the year. You see, when the permanent number system came in for 2014, drivers were asked to submit 3 choices in order of preference, and the FIA would grant one of those numbers depending on if there were any clashes with other drivers. That being said, at the time, given that there was just a smidge over 20 drivers and 98 numbers to choose from between 2 and 99, there wasn't really going to be that much conflict. Well, I mean, at least initially, because when Verstappen came along, it was in 2015. Yes, he had a dabbling in FP1 sessions with Toro Rosso, but he became a fully fledged F1 driver the following year, and his ideal number, which has turned out to be 3, had already been taken by Daniel Ricciardo. So he settled for the number 33, 2 3s, because he thought it would bring him double the luck. And it does make me think that the number 33 might not be long for this world, at least attached to the Dutchman, because a couple of years ago he said he would like to keep the number 1, just that means 33 doesn't come back next year. Certainly he doesn't have the affinity like Sir Lewis Hamilton does for the number 44. Because seriously, Lewis's connection to that number really runs deep. It goes so deep that even when he was winning championships left, right and centre, he still would refuse to run the number 1. He has run the number 1 before, but only in practice sessions as some kind of formality or a token gesture, then quickly switching to 44 for FP2 and onwards. So Max hoping to claim the number 3 now that Daniel Ricciardo has permanently bowed out of Formula 1, despite not having actually crossed the 2-year hold which is in place right now. This is completely consistent with his past comments. His hopes for actually claiming the number 3 have now been realised with the potential of these rules being loosened up a little bit. But wait, look, he said he didn't care if he gets it or not, so why are you making this a big deal? Well, I mean, the fans are making a big deal of it, that's for a start. But also, this is classic Verstappen, as I touched upon just now. He's the kind of guy who seems really indifferent to things that are non-racing related, the fripperies of Formula 1. He even jokes about it, like in the press conference before Las Vegas, he was asked, "Oh, what kind of interesting places would you like to have a Grand Prix feature at next?" And he went, "The North Pole. Ha 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 ha." And in this case, it's to do with branding and merchandise and the way he sells himself, and that is the last thing he really wants to be thinking about. And this is the same guy who happily took the number 1 for his wagon for a few years, and he also said in the past that if you get bestowed the number 1, then you should bally well take it. So in my opinion, it means that the number 33 does have some appeal toward him, but not super duper appeal. At least not enough appeal to elicit a simpering reaction of saying, "Oh no, I would never get rid of number 33, it's my identity." No, he's actually saying, "I'm going to try and change it if I can." And he's already in the media pen, so you're not going to be getting those simpering responses anyway. But when you stop to look at it, Max really does matter, as well as Red Bull and their bottom lines, because just look at their merchandise stores. Even with the number 1 caps, number 33 related merchandise is still running rampant amongst their outlets. MV33, it's really iconic within Formula 1, like LH44 and all that. And CL16, but that maybe could change too. Reuters literally frames it that way too. He raced with 33 before his first title with plenty of numbered merchandise sold. It's permanently tied to him, that number, as Formula 1 has grown. The official line from teams and the series at the time was that this would help personal branding and made it easier for casual viewers to associate a number with a driver instead of a team. Now we talk very naturally about it. You know, with Hamilton's 44, Sebastian Vettel's 5, and why there was so much resistance in that changing. Alonso's number 14, which if you actually look at the reason as to why he has it, oh, it was practically made for him. Kimi Raikkonen's number 7, even though basically the reason is that I had it before in 2013 and I just kept it. And then, of course, the number 3 of Ricciardo. It's really nice and simple to follow, far less taxing on the brain of any newcomers than the old system, which was the numbers would change for the team where they placed in the constructors the year before. It would keep changing. So therefore, drivers would not have that much of a connection to that number because they know it could change the following year, so there's no point really making any merch about it other than the car itself. Now though, oh, it's a completely different story. It is part of their overall story. All for the case of generating a connection with their fans, because you have their initials, you also have a number. I mean, heck, even just look at it's called 33 Max Verstappen. His number is in the title. If you strip that away from his car in 2026, then his entire fan base loses a very important visual shorthand, as in, Max, oh, 33. Well, not anymore. And you want to know what the irony in all of this is that this is going completely against what the sport's been trying to convey to us all for just over a decade at this point, that permanence is akin to identity. And now, and in turn, it becomes a product. Well, now what they're saying with this potential new rule, whatever it turns out to be when the regulations are formalised for next year, oh, permanence, oh, it's not that permanent. And just imagine if you thought, well, okay, Max is probably going to have number 33 next year. I'll go buy a 33 flag or a cap or something like that. And then he rocks up in Melbourne. Oh, he's got the number 3. Oh, okay, that just made my merch outdated. I'm just going to look a bit silly right now. And for a sport that really trades on continuity and consistency, this is a bit of a PR own goal, and something tells me that maybe the FIA had something to do with this more than Formula 1 management or Liberty Media. Because doing this actually accidentally erases part of F1's modern mythology. This is a very major change which kind of swooped under the radar initially because, well, no one's really going to be changing their numbers, and then Max comes along and goes, oh my god, he's actually changing his number! Panic! So therefore, I don't blame fans feeling naturally blindsided. The sport spent a decade telling people numbers were permanent, and now they're not. It was just a single sentence amongst other tweaks, initially glossed over, until Max came along and ruined all of that, him seeking active approval to switch it up. That approval coming from the FIA and, maybe, Daniel Ricciardo himself, since technically he can still claim that number should he actually come back to active racing in 2026. After that, oh yeah, by these rules, Max could easily claim it without any questions or resistance whatsoever. Also, more hardcore fans and Daniel fans will say, well, you claim to have such a connection with that number, Maxi boy. Well, our boy Daniel had connections in karting related to that number as well. And what about his affinity and devotion and passion for Dale Earnhardt with the number 3 in NASCAR? The same NASCAR that he actually got to drive around Austin one time after winning the Italian Grand Prix? And it's not like Daniel's gone, oh yeah, I'm done with Formula 1, guys, I'm just going to ditch my brand and all that. No, the number 3 is on his bloody wine bottles. He's going to run with that till the end of time. And now Max wants it, but why is this being changed right now? Like I said, this is really going against how Formula 1 is trying to sell itself. You could possibly speculate that Verstappen's own camp had something to do with this, giving a little bit of nudge to the FIA because he's got multiple world champion credentials, he might have some political sway, but I just must stress here, there is no proof of that. But even without proof, the timing is suspiciously convenient. Verstappen saying, I'll see over the winter about changing numbers is kind of a power play when you think about it, as well as a personal desire. It is the kind of statement that you can only make when you know the system might bend for you now, and the rest will follow like lambs. Whether he meant it or not, it can be a subtle reminder that the FIA often reacts far greater due to the gravitational pull of its biggest stars. And we all know for the last couple of years that Max has been railing against the system amongst the FIA, but this year it's suddenly gone rather quiet, aside from the penalty points and what have you, more conventional than it was in 2024, especially after Sweargate around Singapore. But yeah, that political clout, Schumacher had it, Hamilton had it, now it's Max's turn to wield it. But what we do know is the direction of travel, that this is going to happen, but the final details have not been published yet. For starters, we don't know whether there'll be any sort of conditions attached to drivers changing their numbers, that do they get to change them as often as they want, or is this sort of a only once sort of thing? And then what happens if you get into a situation that two drivers want to change the number at the same time, and then you have to gift one driver that number and then not the other? That's going to be a quandary, but questions for later. In any case, on the emotional side, since it has become very important these days, you've got two tribes once again colliding. Two tribes who have clashed in the past. Granted, it's water under the bridge mostly, since most of the drama occurred back when they were teammates. But the situation has the capacity of opening up old wounds here. Verstappen fans, for whom 33 is almost a flag, and Ricciardo fans, for whom 3 is their guy's last bit of connection and frontline visibility within Formula 1. And with social media, it's just push and pull absolutely everywhere. Some fans may be saying that, great, Max gets to use the number that he always wanted. And then there are other people that might say, what? Max getting rid of 33? But him not having it is wrong. Like how somebody else having the number 3, and it's not Ricciardo. That feels wrong too. And then there could be some people that might be thinking, this is just going to make things super confusing. Well, no. If you really want things that are confusing, go back to the good old days, the 50s and the 60s, when numbers assigned to drivers were assigned by the track organisers. It could change on a race-by-race basis. You wouldn't know which driver it was unless you took specifically a look at what the programme said or what the announcer said. And it's even harder to keep a track of because all the footage is in black and white. You can't necessarily actually just look, that's a specific person. You just have to go, and there's Stewart going down the straight right there. Oh, look at him go. Absolutely splendidless. But that being said, Max is fully aware that it might not go his way. That's why he also may have verbally shrugged concerning the matter, saying, it doesn't really matter to me. The FIA could maybe dilute this policy to simply adding the phrase, active drivers may change their permanent number, on top of what's already been made. That may mean that Max might just have to wait until 2027, should he choose to switch up his number from 33 to 3. Maybe as some sort of identifier with a brand new team, perhaps, should he leave Red Bull after next year? You might also suggest that the FIA might offer special dispensation, considering that Ricciardo has made it very clear that he is done with Formula 1, and maybe Daniels himself is not all that bothered, that he might just say, no, Maxi boy, you can have it. Yeah, at least one of us gets to have it. Go, go! We've not heard from Daniel, and I don't suspect we will, but I can't imagine that he will be too aggrieved by it because he still can use DR3, that is still connected to him, and he still does wield it in his merchandise and his business ventures. And by the way, fun fact, Max did not only have an affinity with the number 3, he also had 2 other numbers in mind, one of which was 27, but that was taken by Nico Hülkenberg. And can you guess what the other one was? Think of what Maxi Boy is like online. Yes, it was 69. Yeah, but then his father put a stop to that because he thought it was not a good idea. I don't think it would age well, but I think Max would still get a chuckle to this day. But I can easily imagine the drivers of the future, who's going to be taking the number 67 first. They'll be very popular with the youngsters. But yeah, it does really beg the question about which other drivers could actually consider changing up their numbers. Well, I know one person who would never change their number. Well, of course, that's Lewis Hamilton. Because that number probably runs deeper than anybody else's. The number 44 being on his dad's car, as well as it being his karting number, and it's now fully ensconced amongst his business ventures. It's something that is really, truly associated with the guy, and actually, you could also have some kind of an argument in considering special dispensation with the FIA to maybe retire the number 44 due to its connection with the 7-time world champion. But for now, F1 doesn't have any Hall of Fame considerations for such numbers with prestigious connections, so it's not really on the cards, but I do think that topic will come up constantly. That being said, in the light of the passing of Jules Bianchi back in 2015, numbers could be retired as some sort of mark of respect for the dead, the only example thus far of this being a number not being eligible for selection. In relation to that, some folks may believe Leclerc picked 16 to be the number right next to his godfather. It does have a poetic edge to it when you think about it. But in reality, it's a more simplistic reason as to why he picked 16, because he couldn't pick the number 7 because Kimi Räikkönen already had it. 1 plus 6 equals 7, so have 1 and 6 together, there you go. He also, by the way, wanted the number 10, but then his buddy Pierre Gasly took it, him arriving in Formula 1 at the end of 2017, Leclerc arrives in Formula 1 at the start of 2018. He was so close to having the number 10, but, you know, no cigar there. But we all remember the OG number 10, that being Kamui Kobayashi. But it does make you wonder, could, with these brand new regulations, Charles Leclerc change his number to 7 in the not-too-distant future? I mean, when I looked at his brand new merch drop, the Leclerc signature looked really, really permanent, whereas the number 16 in the corner, that looked like something you could just go, 16 remove and 7, there you go. Well, I think one person he would have to ask first whether or not he could take it is one Jack Doohan. And it also really depends on the final wording of the regulations when they are finalised, and if the Australian is willing to part company with it, since he is the current claimant. I doubt he would be quick to roll over on that matter, since it could be a psychological admission that he is done with Formula 1, and so is his number. With this new ruling, Charles may have to wait until 2028 before he can take the number 7 with no strings attached. Maybe he too might change it if he changes a certain team, like I mentioned with Max and somewhere else if that does happen, because, you know, the whole rumours about Leclerc going to Aston Martin, they have flared up again. But that's for another video. This video, in fact. Okay, I must admit, when this news first dropped, I did think, oh, okay, that seemed interesting. But now it's completely exploded. But okay, how flexible will this be actually in practice? Because we all talk about this as being something sensational, but reality does bite sometimes, and it usually turns out to be quite dull. Like we all expected rain to be dominating the entire Brazilian weekend, and we barely got a hair of it, with reality being a lot more boring than the build-up. We'll only know for sure once the sporting regulations are published. However, it would be very out of character for the FIA to just allow completely free swapping without any sort of conditions whenever someone feels like a rebrand on a whim. There's a lot of moving parts to consider of all of this. Broadcasters, timing systems, sponsors, teams. A lot of importance is put on these numbers because you got to stitch them on a cap or put them on a shirt, or you've got to set up your graphics just so without having to just suddenly change something on the fly. It would be an utter nightmare for people to have to change it in the middle of the season once probably they've got it locked down months prior. You got to remember here that sometimes with merch it takes ages to plan it and get it actioned. Like with all of those special edition caps, they're not made in a couple of weeks. They take months to actually scrutinize, finalize, and then distribute. If you suddenly go, oh no wait, Charles is changing his number next year. Oh, we just sorted this out! So the only compromise that I think could happen is that, yeah, maybe you can make a change, but you have to make it within a certain period, like in between seasons. You can't just do it in the middle of a Grand Prix year. You know, give some folks time to adjust. Maybe, as I mentioned, you can only do it one time as some kind of mulligan, that you couldn't have that number at the time because somebody else had it, but they're not in the sport anymore, and you can go, oh, well, I would like it now. Can I have it now, FIA? Or maybe it might just be a case of, yeah, you can, but you still have to wait 2 years if that person's actually gone. But it still does mean that the Verstappen changing his number to 3 and Leclerc maybe to 7, that might still be on the cards. At the same time, it wouldn't make anyone else's lives harder or more miserable. It would also give Liam Lawson fans some hope that he might actually take up Lightning McQueen's number of 95 instead of the number 30. But in reality, that number 30 does actually have a lot of connections with him, that being a karting number, as well as the number of one of his karting heroes. It has real personal sentimentality to it, but then again, Lightning McQueen has a lot of, connections with him and is very important. So, who knows? It could happen, but I don't see that happening. He's had that number 30 since he was 8 years old. But if you just take a step back and look at it from the bigger picture, is that this little change that was sort of a neat idea at the time has really become an important part of F1's universe, hasn't it? In just over a decade. Because before 2014, race numbers were mainly reflecting team performance, not the driver performance, except the number 1. Schumacher 1 flags would never sell because they knew that it would go to someone else eventually, that number. Only that was tied to a driver, the champion. Or if the champion bowed out of F1 together, you get the number 0. Hence why you see pictures of Damon Hill racing with it. And then you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, Alain Prost was the team leader of Williams in 1993. Surely he would have taken the number 0 after Nigel Mansell split and went off to America. Well, apparently, according to some sources, he didn't like the idea of having the number 0 because, well, filling in the shoes of a former world champion, as well as, the connotations, so he decided to pick the number 2. There are some suspicions that Ayrton thought the same thing and why he didn't pick the number 0 and that Damon already had it, so it was just a lot easier, so he then picked the number 2 as well. But I'm not 100% on that one. I recommend Shane Bear's video on the history of F1 numbers, by the way, for a more detailed breakdown about this, but I warn you, it gets a little messy, but definitely worth the watch. But yeah, times have changed. Now, these numbers in Formula 1 are like football shirt numbers, or like they are in MotoGP. They carry the weight of a driver's whole career, and sometimes even after they stop racing, or even in their deaths, and then maybe living on as potentially the next part of a brand new driver's chapter or legacy. Almost like the passing of the torch in some circles, that you carry a great honour in having that number, as well as like some kind of legacy character. Like whoever picks the number 46 will have the spirit of Valentino Rossi bestowed upon them. But yeah, these mid-career changes potentially could add a whole new layer to all of that, with drivers correcting mistakes at the time, or maybe they go, I don't really like that number anymore, I'm just going to change it because, vibes. But at the cost of all of the continuity and the talk about this is the number they carry with them for the rest of their time in the sport. And so far, in the 11 years that this has been implemented, the most convoluted number has been the number 6, that being bestowed on 3 drivers. First there was Nico Rosberg, then there was Nicholas Latifi, and now currently Isaac Hadjar. Rosberg picking 6, by the way, because it was his father Keki's lucky number, and the one which he secured his 1982 world title. In that single example, 3 drivers in 11 years? There's going to be more of this as time goes on, especially now you can change them more rapidly. So quite frankly, the uproar around Verstappen's comments and the idea of numbers changing in the middle of a career, I think is somewhat justifiable. It's become more than what Max simply wants. It actually changes things that fans thought were completely set in stone. It's now potentially being edited into something a little bit more fluid, and it's lost a lot of its mystique. And should there come a time when Bortoleto chooses to change his number now this rule has been applied, and Carlos Sainz can pick his number, he might pick the number 5 since that is his favourite. And I bet you that if they did that, then Williams would leap on that and have some moment when they put on red 5. But I really don't think Gabi is going to change it because it's just too important to him, so he would just have to settle with red 55. Either way, for a sport that really wants to lean into its nostalgia for gaining clicks and merchandise sales, this is a really weird choice to make. This was going to blow up eventually, but I didn't expect it was going to take like 6 days for it to blow off. Max 1 pushing the detonator. And another story I wish to push to you is this one. I really think it's going to be pushing your buttons immensely. I'll see you over there. Just gotta get a drink of water.